Minnesota. We'll take a snapshot of what's happening, I guess, during the special event coming up at the Faribault American Legion on June the 10th. We have Susan Garwood with us, Executive Director of Rice County Historical Society. They're doing a fundraiser on June the 10th at the Legion. And Susan, thanks for stopping by.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for letting me.
I really appreciate your being with us this morning on our AM Minnesota show. It'd be nice if I turned on the right microphone, wouldn't it?
Well, it always helps.
Yeah.
and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for letting me join you.
Hey, not a problem. So, the over and back band are going to be performing. Last year was Buddy Koopman's orchestra.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, the over and back band, of course, is a local band, and it's fun. They're almost 25 years in production, so I've not been to their show, but
they're good.
That's what I've heard, so I'm really looking forward to it.
I always attend their performance at the Cathedral of Our Merciful Savior during Heritage Days.
Oh, sure. Sure. Good fundraiser for the cathedral, and I'm sure. I think, don't they do that for the meals that they serve, the kitchen?
I'm sure they do.
That's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
They really do a fantastic job. You have your toe tapping for hymns, and that's the way hymns are supposed to be, I think.
Absolutely.
Should be praising and toe tapping.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. So they'll be terrific. We know that a lot of folks will go just to hear the band, and you're going to have a silent auction and all kinds of things, right?
Yes, we sure are. Yep. So the evening starts with a social hour at 5 o'clock, dinner at 6 o'clock, and then the band will start playing at 7. And throughout all of that, there's the silent auction that happens throughout and then closes at the very end of the day.
Now, remember last year, man, did you have a lot of items on your silent auction?
We did. We sure did. We had all kinds of things, gift certificates and baskets and other kinds of items.
Yep. Well, anybody that's attended any silent auction, you have everything you have in every other silent auction, but some additional stuff too that you don't normally find at other silent auctions.
Right. We I know that, I think when I came in there this morning, there was a football that had a door on it, so I'll bet you it's some kind of a bank or something like that on the table. They're happening all the time. The gifts and donations from local businesses are coming in. I know that there's History Theater tickets from the Twin Cities that are included. I know that there's gift certificates from all kinds of businesses in town and so on.
Yeah, last year I think you had a canoe trip with John Anderson down the Straight River.
I don't think that was on our event, but
It wasn't?
I don't think so. Although that sounds like a good one.
You really think so?
I think so.
You might have to find him a canoe, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's probably that.
Yeah, but I'm sure we could find one somewhere. Anyway, we're going to visit more with Susan about what those dollars are used for at the Rice County Historical Society. We are very blessed to have a terrific museum over there by the fairgrounds.
Thank you. Thank you. We're lucky. You know, this is our 90th anniversary this year, and we've been doing a lot of things to celebrate that. But really, none of it would have been possible if it hadn't been for the wisdom and dedication of volunteers for the previous 90 years. We're really very lucky.
You had your expansion last year.
We did, and that has been incredible. This is not only for the programs, but this year we have really expanded our education programs. And it has been heavily used and deeply appreciated by, so far, about 450 local kids, and we've got another 80 kids coming this morning and 90 tomorrow, and it's been an amazing space. It's really helped us share Rice County history.
So keep in mind, folks, today is history, tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So some items that you might think about throwing out that might, be partial to this particular part of time, you might want to save.
Absolutely. In fact, lots of people make the mistake thinking that if it has to be 50 or 100 years old before it's important. In the museum world, we're actually, you hit the nail on the head. We collect today for tomorrow because right now is when it's in perfect condition. The object is not crinkled or not overly used, and that makes it so much easier to ensure that in 100 years it also looks just as great.
Just gone by like a flash, hasn't it?
It has.
You enjoy it. I get the sense that you really enjoy this.
Oh, I do. I do. It's a great opportunity to, I mean, really think about it. I get to listen to people's stories, and then I get to do a little bit of research to learn more about it, and then share that story with other people. That's really what history is about. You know, so often, although not today's generation, but there's certainly our generation learned history as facts and numbers and dates. Yes. About specific famous people. And in the 1970s, early 80s, there was a shift to seeing history as being more about people in general, not just the famous people, but the everyday life. And women's diaries, or notes from the maid service, or the servants and so on, that the life of everyone is what's interesting. And so at any rate, that shift of history being the collection of stories of the past has really made history come alive. I was just talking before the break about our school tours. The kids love what we do here. They love going through the museum. They in the log cabin, they all gather there and try and imagine what life is like. When they're in the school, we actually, today is a great example, we have a volunteer who's actually going to be in costume, and for 1 hour she'll actually be giving a lesson as though it's a one-room school from the past. So, and not to mention the collection out in Harvest and Heritage Hall, and just talking about the changes in technology and agriculture. My goodness sakes, talk about an industry that's transformed over the last 150 plus years. So.
Yeah, well, it wasn't all that many years ago, and wheat was the #1 crop around here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the reasons that we had so many mills along the Cannon River at one point in time. In fact, the Twin Cities, if you've ever been up to Mill City Museum, it's a fabulous place. But if you listen very carefully, their history begins in the 1880s. And absolutely, Minneapolis became known as really Mill City, and was the place for flour development of the big scale. But before 1880, the reason their history doesn't start until then is because Rice County was the center of milling before that. And was earning top ranks at all competitions on the East Coast and so on, getting more, as much as $1 per barrel more than the flour that was being milled out of the Twin Cities. So Rice County's history in milling is huge, and in part it was absolutely the Cannon Valley wheat, but also the power of the Cannon River itself.
Yeah. Well, that kind of went bygone, how long, 50 years, 40 years?
More like 75, and really what happened there was the trains and the ability to ship large quantity. There were certainly trains down here, but the flour was being consumed in such vast quantities. You needed to be able to ship a lot quickly. And so that's why, for example, Morristown, in 1911, their mill, which was a flour mill, became a feed mill. And there was a change that happened there, interestingly, within agriculture, where prior to really about turn of the century, and work that had been done up at the Minnesota Ag Extension, the University of Minnesota, prior to that, pretty much cows and animals ate whatever you fed them. And there wasn't too much attention to the details such as nutrition and
right.
so on. And about the turn of the century, all of that changed, and so the role of the feed mill in improving the quality of the meat and the just overall nutrition really became popular. And so that was one of the reasons they transformed. So, and they did that because they couldn't compete with the flour. Not that little mill. Only big, giant mills were able to really produce enough to be successful.
But it's cool that they've kept that. I was in Morristown earlier this week, and of course, Dam Days is this weekend.
Absolutely. It'll be great. If you haven't been, you've got to go. To watch that mill in operation and just to see it, it's fabulous.
It really is cool that they've been able to preserve that.
They have. You know, there's one more mill in Rice County that's actually still in operation. Of course, that's the Ames Mill in Northfield, and that's where the Ames Mill right on the dam, that's where, I guess it's now Post Brands cereals, that's where they manufacture the hot multi-meal cereal. So it's kind of neat, and that's a mill that's been making food in one way or another since 1872.
So they're still making food?
They're still making food, yep.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Since 1872, you said?
Exactly. That's changed hands, and it's changed product, because in 1872 it was still flour. But then about that same time that Morristown transitioned from a flour mill to a feed mill, the Ames Mill transitioned from a flour mill to a cereal company. That's when the Campbells came up out of Owatonna and started making cereal out of that mill. So again, it has, although not flour, it's still been making a food product since 1872. I think that's amazing.
It's really amazing to see the shift over time in the types of businesses, and people 50 years from now are going to look back at this time and say the same thing, you know.
Right. You know, I sometimes wonder that as I look around, wondering what are we doing today that feels so modern and cutting edge and is going to be archaic within our own lifetimes. I mean, think about that. Within our time, TV went from black and white to color.
Oh, we had the rabbit ears antennas. You got 3 channels if you were lucky.
Absolutely. You know, you had your phone was a single phone. You know, I didn't grow up with a party line or anything like that, although I have heard that that was an experience. But, you know, there were no private conversations. You didn't have your phone with you at all times. You had as long of a cord as you could get, and maybe if you were lucky you had another telephone in a private room so you could have a private conversation. But still, I just think about what changes in technology are around the corner that will make what we have now archaic and old.
I mean, I remember telling Mom and Dad, well, gee, I just couldn't call. I wasn't near a phone. Can't say that nowadays.
No, you can't. You can't, exactly.
Which is kind of a bummer. I'm kind of glad I grew up when I did.
Well, there was something nice about not always being on, not always being expected to answer the phone or something like that. Something nice about unplugging.
But don't you find, too, in your travels and your visits with people, that everybody says that when they grew up, they enjoyed that time. They wouldn't want to grow up in any other time period. Both my parents said that, I know.
Absolutely. You're right. You're right. We here in the United States have always been blessed that each generation has known prosperity in one form or another. Even during the Depression era, there was, because I've talked with many of folk who grew up in that, it was hard times, there's no question about it, but the sense of community, the working together, the taking care of each other piece, they enjoyed that part, even though the times were hard.
And a greater percentage of Americans then were farmers, and they could grow their own food,
right,
that sort of thing.
Right, they could subsist on what they could plant and so on. Although, of course, one of the things that made the Depression happen were the Dust Bowls and the other pests and so on that were that was beyond. So even the farmers couldn't grow their own food to feed their own families because there wasn't enough moisture and so on. So. But still, here in Rice County, we didn't have issues with dust bowls. Still hard times, but I think probably better than other places, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Not for everybody.
All I know is Memorial Day just concluded the other day, and I saw a movie over the weekend that reminded me of the fact that there was a POW camp right here in Faribault.
There was, absolutely, at the right off of 14th and 2nd Avenue, 14th Street and 2nd Avenue, right next to the Faribault Foods plant. Yep, there were Quonset huts there and so on. I want to say the POWs were there for maybe a year and a half, tops. And they were, that was German POWs, and different plants were able to put in a request for a certain number to do specific work. So they were there to help with canning and so on.
Yeah, Faribault Foods?
Yes.
And I was told by some people that were around at the time that some of the young ladies would enjoy going over and watching the young men with their shirts off working out in the outdoors, although if they were working with canning, I wouldn't find that to be the case. But anyway.
I hadn't heard that one, but you never know.
And then, of course, some of them stayed here and married women here.
Yes, yep, that's what I've heard. I do know that there was certainly communication through the fence line. We have a couple of artifacts that were actually donated to the museum within the last year that were POW made things that were given or traded through the fence line to some folks. So made here in town by the German POWs who were at that camp over there near Faribault Foods. So.
And I often think, geez, I wonder if any of those were POWs of my dad, who was stationed in World War II in France, and he transported those prisoners back home.
Oh, interesting.
I just often wondered if any of them here.
Oh.
As, you know, it's a small world, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. You never know. That's interesting. You know, you could probably figure that out, perhaps. I'm not probably finding out a little bit about the troop that your dad was in, doing a little bit of history up at the National Archives in Washington, D.C.
I think it's great, the shift in history that you noted earlier, though, from, you know, just famous people's histories to all of our history. We all have a story.
We do. And in fact, I'd argue that our stories are more interesting. You know, famous people certainly get to brush elbows with lots of people, but it's so distant. It's apart from us.
Yep.
And I don't know, I think that the idea of being and walking among this community and knowing the stories of what happened right where I'm standing, that's much more powerful to me than to hear about some famous person who met somebody else famous and they had important conversations. Not to say that that's not valuable. It's important because they certainly impacted the rest of our lives. I'm thinking about all of the FDR New Deal plans and the reason we have a viaduct and a courthouse and so on, those WPA programs, and how important they were here, for sure. But local history has always been my passion. It's how I'm still enjoying what I do after 13 years here. It really is, it's a neat way to connect with a place, and you get to see some of the past and how you can see it playing out in what's happening today. And
it is interesting to find out when you read the biographies of some of these guys that they weren't quite as, guys and gals, that they weren't quite as invincible as they seemed at the time. They were normal human beings like you and me.
Right, absolutely.
You mentioned FDR, that's what made me think of that.
Right, in a wheelchair. You know, he was a man of his time. I've often wondered whether or not, I can't imagine today electing somebody who was in a wheelchair. 4 times they did.
Yeah.
And that was because, of course, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Facebook, there wasn't internet, there wasn't 24/7 cameras, and he and his people could be in control of photo shoots and so on.
Yeah, most people didn't even know.
Right, exactly.
You know, you'd be riding in a car or something, they wouldn't know.
Right, absolutely. You think about some of the photos of the time, right, sitting at the desk, or there are some certainly of him standing, but what they didn't see were the braces of having him slowly stand, and then the photo being taken when he's in position. So.
Yeah, incredible.
For sure.
One of my favorite presidents, I don't know about you, for whatever reason, I enjoy reading about Abraham Lincoln because he really comes through as very human.
Right.
You know, losing a son while he was in the White House and having some mental health issues.
Yeah, and coming out of a place not of privilege, but of truly pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which is one of the hallmarks of American culture that we really celebrate, is those who come from a place without privilege to being able to rise as far as he did.
You know, one of the things that people will probably be thinking about, a quarter century, which Seems like a long time, but it's not.
Not at all.
Quarter century from now, they'll be looking back on the influx of Somalians into our community, for example.
Absolutely. In fact, I was talking about that with some of our volunteers. We were talking about one of the buildings that's on the museum fairgrounds, and it is the church, and how the church certainly, of course, has that religious component, but it actually has a bigger social story that can be told and related to today. The church is a place of community in a world where you aren't necessarily around people who can speak the same language. Faribault had how many Catholic churches? One that spoke French, one that was for Germans, and one that was for Irish, because that was your community. And in fact, in some cases, if you were from the Irish Catholic and you dated somebody from the French Catholic Church, that was a serious, not something to do. But church as the place where, or a religious community, thinking about the Somalis, and the mosque as a place where, can you imagine, throughout your day, you're having to struggle to communicate. This one place, this one time a week, where everyone understands. The place where you can speak freely and just know that you're understood. I think that alone has got to be transformative. And all of the things that community, that church used to be, that we get other connections now. Church used to be the only thing to do in town, frankly. You didn't have the telephone, you didn't have the TV, you didn't have radio necessarily. Church was where you made connections with people. It was your social place. So, think about the Somali community and the role of the mosque in town for that community to find a place here in town. I think that's really important.
I'm sure it's true here. I know in my hometown, my church growing up had German services into the mid-1960s, 64, 65, somewhere around there. They quit doing a German service, a service in German. They had an English service and a German service.
I think the same is true up in Northfield at St. John's Lutheran Church. I think about the same time is when they stopped having Norwegian services. Same sort of thing.
So in relation to history, that isn't all that long ago.
No, it really isn't. No, we 25 years, 50 years from now seems like a long time, but when you look back, it really isn't.
No, it goes by in a heartbeat.
It sure does.
So again, this fundraiser is June 10th. How can people get tickets?
You can contact us at the Rice County Historical Society. Probably best to give us a call at 507-332-2121, or you can, of course, send us an email. Just let us know you're interested in tickets. They're $25 a piece for the dinner. We also have a $100 raffle ticket, and for that $100, you actually get 2 dinner tickets. You also get a 1 in 5 chance of actually winning your $100 back, and then a 1 in 100 chance of winning the grand prize, which is $1,500. Speaking of 25 years, that's actually how long, just about how long the Over and Back Band have been performing together.
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Quarter of a century.
Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, the Over and Back Band is with Craig Wasner, Steve Jennings, Mike Hildebrandt, and Gordon Oshwald. And on the 10th, they're adding Ken Wilson to the group for the performance. So it should be really fun. It's here in town at the American Legion, and again, tickets are available at the Rice County Historical Society. And
you want to emphasize, I'm sure, that this is the Rice County Historical Society. It's
Absolutely.
Not Faribault's, it's Rice County's.
Absolutely, which is why we're excited to encourage folks to head on over to Morristown for Dam Days, and why we know so much about Northfield's history. It's the whole county. And that's maybe why I've continued to be as engaged in what I do for 13 years, because it's a big county. There's a lot of history and a lot of stories.
Yeah. Well, when you think back, you go to the memorial, the Veterans Memorial on the North Lawn of the Rice County Courthouse, and you see all those names of Civil War veterans.
Right.
I mean, this county had a lot of people serve in the Civil War.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, over 600 people in Rice County, 600 men in Rice County were a part of the Civil War. Put that into perspective. there were 6,000 residents at the county, so that's 10%. Right at the moment, I think we have over 60,000 people.
Yep.
So imagine 6,000 Rice County residents today being involved in a war of some kind. I mean, that was a very intimate war. Everybody was touched in one way or another by that war. Either your father, your brother, your uncle, your cousin, your neighbor, somebody was involved. So yeah, isn't that a wonderful memorial?
Oh yeah.
It's beautiful. Northfield has another one as well.
Yep.
Their memorial.
In fact,
park.
in July, I think of next year, will be the 100th anniversary of the dedication of the Civil War Memorial on the North Lawn, which they built the memorial around. They're going to rededicate that next year.
Right, and it's a Civil War Memorial. The reason it was 100th anniversary was that they did that at the same time as World War I, because next year, of course, is the 100th anniversary of World War I, of the United States involvement.
And they thought, geez, if we're going to do something for World War I, we should probably do something for the Civil War.
Absolutely.
I mean, it only made sense.
Well, right, and many of the Civil War vets were at that point in time in their 80s, of course, and it was a time to make sure to honor them. You bet.
Well, not a lot of people lived into their 80s back then either.
They did not. They did not. Life and.
If I remember right, well, I don't remember right. I don't even remember wrong. So thanks, Susan.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks so
looking
much for
forward to
letting me join you today.
You bet. June the 10th again, and tickets available at the Historical Society. Are there anywhere else, or just at the Historical Society?
Historical Society, but there are also our board members have them on them. So Richard Carlander at the State Bank, which, by the way, I need to say a shout out to them. They are the sponsors for this event, and thank you so much to them. They're sponsoring the band.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have them in town.
Yep, thanks to the State Bank of Faribault for that. And that's on Friday, June the 10th at the Faribault American Legion. I guarantee you, I was there last year, I guarantee you'll have a good time.
Thanks. I sure think so. And it's for everything that we're doing, the kid programs that we're doing, and all the other great events that we've got coming up at the Historical Society throughout the next year.
And we'll have to have you on again and talk about that. Thanks, Susan.
We'd love to. Thanks for letting me join you today.
Susan Garwood, Executive Director of the Rice County Historical Society. Tomorrow we'll have folks in from the Faribault Area Chamber of Commerce. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota on KD.